What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to FudgeMuppet. My name is Michael, and today I'm bringing you another Elder Scrolls 6 discussion, this time on enemy scaling. If you do like these discussions, be sure to subscribe and to check out our other ES6 discussions, which we do every Friday. So let's chat about enemy scaling and what we think needs to be done. Enemy scaling is all about what levels enemies are in relation to what level you are. In the wonderful game of Skyrim, tough enemies were really fun, however, enemy scaling could definitely be more developed. I mean, it wasn't terrible at all, but there's just some things we think they could do with it to make it a lot cooler. A lot of the time, even after you had done everything in the game, maxed out your character to level 81 when there was a level cap, and mastered combat, magic, stealth, or a combination of these, you still had enemies that were on your level. Guards, for example, scaled all the way to level 81. So basically level-wise, you can't be better than a guard. I mean, you're the Dragonborn, but the local guard recruits who have just learnt to wield a sword and don't really have much training will certainly give you a run for your money. Here at FudgeMuppet, we envision an Elder Scrolls game where enemies who change levels have more of a cap. There should be more enemies that are always weak, and more enemies that are always strong. Level 81 enemies, or whatever the level cap ends up being, are fine as long as it makes sense for them to be tough to fight. A good example of how this could be done was the way Fallout New Vegas did some of its enemy scaling. For example, at the start of the game, you could go to Quarry Junction and get absolutely demolished by all kinds of scary deathclaws. Then at the end of the game, when you've reached the level cap, you'll still find weak geckos and praying mantises to fight. As I said before, Skyrim's scaling system was not a catastrophe, but we think more enemy scaling should occur in some specific locations. For example, there should be a particular hideout of bandits that are menacing and experienced mercenaries, always level 50, regardless of what level you are. One thing though that I do want to get out of the way is that scaling should not be overdone. I will explain to you in this video how I want more locations and areas that permanently have strong enemies, but this should not be done everywhere. If it's done to such a massive degree, it ruins exploration of the game and you can't go and look at most of the things. Massive amounts of the game, particularly the open, large expanses, should have similar forms of scaling to what we've seen before. So moving on, the other thing about Skyrim's scaling system that could be improved was slightly touched on in our Better Magic for Elder Scrolls 6 discussion, and this was that some spells couldn't even work for a maxed out character. Basically, by the time you were level 81, you can't play the game how you want. For illusion magic, you're forced to use dual wielding expert spells with the dual wielding perk to affect enemies, and even master spells are useless on level 81 enemies. I mean, come on, it's the master spell, and yet because it doesn't take advantage of the dual wielding perk, it can't even work at the end of the game. Remember, this is against enemies as basic as guards. As the bloody Dragonborn in the Archmage of Winterhold College, and or whatever you've decided to achieve, you should be able to walk into a city and if you want to, absolutely destroy the guards like it's nothing at all. They should all be capped at level 50 or so. Scaling was definitely a bigger problem in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, because in Oblivion, wolves would turn into bears and you wouldn't really see wolves anymore, so good work Bethesda for fixing that. However, it's time to take things a step further and do a thorough job with enemy scaling by applying it to certain zones and locations. I don't want everything to scale with me. The same frostbite spider you fight on level 1 shouldn't be the same difficulty to fight at level 35. So this is some stuff I think they could do with area scaling. Certain areas in Elder Scrolls 6 outside of the open landscapes, which as I said shouldn't all be made high level because this would degrade exploration, should permanently have enemies that scale between certain ranges. For example, between the levels of 1 and 10. So once you're level 10, these enemies will stay at level 10 even when you're level 20, even level 60. There should also of course be areas where enemies will always only exist between 10 and 20, 15 and 25, 30 and 50, 40 and the level cap, whatever, just a set range. As I said, one of the biggest things we want as well is a lot more location-based scaling, but again, as I've also said, you don't want these level range limits all over the place. We'd want a lot of these level-based areas to be in sort of specific places like some dungeons or the top of certain mountains. This would incentivize leveling, so the game isn't always holding your hand, and in many cases this is more rewarding. Now, although I said open expanse main game areas should mostly remain scaled to the player level, there should be exceptions, and that's why I say mostly. For example, imagine a swamp in the open that is dense with dangerous, mysterious monsters. Things like this would be cool to explore at higher levels when you're able to, or also at lower levels where you would have to be extremely cautious. As you can see, this video is definitely a discussion. There's no plain cut solution, and Bethesda is going to have to balance exploration with challenge, as well as all players' desires from all different perspectives. An example of the main thing we would want is that which is tucked away. Imagine in Elder Scrolls 6 you hear of a dwarven dungeon that is supposedly really dangerous. I'm talking it has a reputation for being absolutely deadly. An NPC warns you to never go there, but for some reason Bethesda decides they'll then mark it out for you on your map, just in case you're feeling stupid. So you go to this dwarven ruin that is renowned for death, and when you arrive, all the enemies are level 70, and they're super intimidating. This is what Elder Scrolls 6 needs. It makes the game more fun, surprising, and of course realistic in an awesome way. Also, on the topic of super hard dungeons, you should be able to find powerful armor in some of the rarer high-level places even at level 1. So Daedric should definitely not be in random loot, but certainly should be in a place like this dwarven ruin, even if you've just started the game. Of course, Bethesda would have to make it so this can't be exploited by making the level 70 enemies impossible to avoid and defeat at such a low level. This way you get the satisfaction of knowing all the awesome loot is still hidden out there and there's a potential to get it. It's just extremely hard, almost not possible to get your hands on, until of course you're a higher level and grow more powerful. In the same way, even though I don't think there are going to be dragons in Elder Scrolls 6, maybe one or two as super hard bosses, they also shouldn't have been scaled so dramatically. In Skyrim, most of the dragons ended up being a revered dragon, an ancient dragon, or a legendary one at the end of the game. Moving on, although the main areas of the game shouldn't be dense with super tough creatures, I think something super cool would be to have a small handful of super high level enemies scattered around in the open. If the game was in Hammerfell, for example, I'd want to be able to have a random shiny Pokemon chance encounter with a level 50 Scorpion that jumps out of the sand while I'm at level 10, and be forced to run in awe as I look at the crazy amount of power it has. At the same time, we don't want this behemoth of misfortune to be able to stumble across our favorite city and kill all the NPCs, which is probably one of the reasons guards were scaled, to fight dragons. But you don't want random creatures attacking towns and killing cool NPCs, especially outside of your control. One final point before I wrap this all up is something I saw in Oblivion, and it may have been in Skyrim a little bit, but I can't think of any examples right now. What I'm talking about is the changing enemy types, like certain types of enemies only appearing later. I remember in Oblivion I would actually wait till I was a higher level before I did certain quests. Not because they were hard, but just so I'd be able to see cooler types of enemies. You don't get the same satisfaction going through the whole main storyline fighting scamps as you do when you go through it at a higher level fighting Daedroths and Zavali constantly. Just food for thought. What do you think they should do with this? And now it's time to wrap up this week's Elder Scrolls 6 discussion on enemy scaling. Subscribe to FudgeMuppet for more Elder Scrolls 6 videos, and leave your video ideas and comments below. This video will definitely have some interesting comments because, as you can probably tell, it's very complex and there aren't always right and wrong answers. Social media links are in the description. Tell us what you think of our intro and or outro. My name is Michael, and I'll see you soon. Peace.